You're live.
Call the meeting. Call the meeting, the school committee, the city board and main order. Monday, January 24, 2020.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to do school committee introductions. I want to make sure everyone who's here knows our student reps, the senior from the high school, is Omar Osman. Omar's here. Nice to have you with us. Last year, all we saw you was the Zoom, so I'm glad to have you first now. Thank you.
We can get that fixed. I didn't know he was going to be here tonight. Yeah.
We want to hear from you if you have anything to say, so I want to make sure you're on the line. Make your heart that way. Ward 2. Ward 3.
Superintendent. Who's staying in Ward 1?
Andrew Whitlow, Ward 4. Axelina, Ward 5. Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
All Oklahoma, Ward 7.
Scott, Southwest.
Thank you. Be on the agenda, consent agenda. Anyone who items, are there any items that members want to remove from the consent agenda?
Yeah.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to point out from our minutes of our last meeting on January 10th that the chairperson, Megan Parks, called the meeting to order.
Correction of the minutes. Is there anything else? Seeing none, consent agenda is approved. Next item 4 is public input. Let me take a public and address the school committee for up to 3 minutes. Items now. On the agenda item, comments that will come to staff. Staff and comments shall be directed to the school committee. Name, address, and affiliation.
You got to push the little button with the people. See the little person? Yep. You got it.
Is it good now?
Yep.
Okay. Good evening, members of the school committee. My name is Melissa Bethia, and I'm a senior at LPS. I'm here on behalf of the Restorative Justice Club and all the students who have been affected by this issue. We are proposing a change to the pledge of allegiance policy currently in place at LHS and LGC. I'd like to begin with a summary of the current policy and necessary legal changes. Then I will go over some student testimony. The current policy was written in 2000 and reviewed in 2012. It is titled Patriotic Exercises with the code IMBA. I provided physical copies and a packet of supplementary materials for the committee members. Attention to the third paragraph that states, students who object to participating in the flag salute as a matter of conscience shall be excused from doing so upon submission of a request in writing and signed by a parent guardian, which provides evidence of sincere conviction. There is a legal reference at the bottom of the page. However, when we looked into that specific reference, we found it had been radically changed by the state in 2011. The paragraph I highlighted no longer exists. In fact, the majority of language from the patriotic exercises have been removed. The current legal reference is item B in your packet. You'll see that the only rule remaining regarding the flag and the pledge is item number 6, ensuring that there will be
a flag in every classroom. In 2015, South Portland High School made a similar change in their policy, and the state law was on their side. The article about that shift is item C in your packet. Moving beyond Maine, the Supreme Court ruled in 1943 during the case of West Virginia State Board of Education versus Barnett that students couldn't be forced to salute the US flag or say the pledge because doing so would violate their First Amendment rights. Justice Robert Jackson wrote that majority opinion and stated, if there is any fixed stars in our constitutional constellation, it is that no official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion, or force citizens to confess by word or act their faith therein. Both the case and the majority opinion are in your packet as item D and E, respectively. Justice Jackson reminds us that the US was built on the foundation of free will and choice. Since then, the rights of students have been clarified further. Federal courts have decided that not only can you keep quiet during the pledge, but you can also sit down or raise your fist in protest as long as you're not disturbing others. We propose to change the current policy to more closely reflect state and national law. Specifically, that students do not need to stand or recite the pledge under any circumstances with or without the note from a parent or guardian. Although we believe the legal arguments are strong enough to make changes, we also wanted to add student testimonials. While I am currently speaking for them, these are not my opinions or experiences. While I'm currently speaking, a handful of students have been kicked out of class for refusing to stand. These students were taken away from their learning environment. Not only are those students missing important class time, it is affecting the way they create relationships in the class with their teacher. Many of our students want to abstain for religious reasons. Some students feel that their teachers and schools were pushing their beliefs onto them, especially when the pledge does not resonate with them. We believe schools should be a place where students feel safe expressing their beliefs, where they are seen and heard for who they are, and a place where we can learn about each other without worrying about penal consequences from the school. The last item, F, is the contact information for the club and our mentor, Ms. Rusher. Thank you for your attention and time. I hope that we can move forward together with changing this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others in attendance who would like to address the school committee? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment section. The next item, item 5, is to recognize Lewiston Public School staff. We have Superintendent Langlis will address.
So we had multiple certificates for tonight, and then reminding people that we were meeting tonight, we had 5 individuals from different schools that were actually unable to attend. So I anticipate a big number of people at our next meeting, but we do have recognitions. I even have the certificates in my folder, but again, we want to recognize them in person whenever possible, and they felt they could be here next time. So we're going to hit pause on that, but plenty to be thankful for.
Okay. Item number 6 is to receive a presentation regarding family survey data results and district goal setting. Superintendent.
Yeah, so I'll kick things off. I have a document here that can be shared each way. Oops. I think there's enough that went that way. And we have coming up to the podium who's going to join us, Steve Maroon, who is our school improvement coordinator. Steve does a great job with data, all things data, and presentation and interpretation of that data. So we're very happy that Steve could be here to join us. We also have Aisha Hall, and Aisha is our SEL and equity coordinator. And so some of the data that we'll be looking at today is about the family school relationships. These surveys went out to our community and they've been compiled. And Steve and Aisha will walk us through some of those components. Before we dive too deep into the presentation and the data, I'd like to ask you to reference the sheet that just came out to you. This is pulled from a scholarly text by Peter Sang called the Fifth Element, but it's really around the fifth discipline, excuse me. It's really around what they call the ladder of inference. And they use the steps of a ladder to help us grasp a framework where we observe data from the real world. And so that's what we see. That's kind of our lived experience. So that's the lens that we come at things with. And then we pick and choose the data that we see and we observe. And so it escalates where we are in our thought process. And then this is just all people. And then we make assumptions based on that data. And then we add meaning to it. And so you start to draw conclusions, right? So we see the things that we see, we hear the data that we hear, we choose what voices and lenses that we're going to operate under. And then we adopt beliefs about the world. And this is where opinion essentially comes from. And then we take actions on those things based on the beliefs and the structures that we've set up. I'm always cautious with the ladder of inference because I don't want to make decisions for our district that are too biased in my own thinking and not cycling the will of our community, our school committee, and our students. And so I wanted to share this with you because I think this really challenges my preconceptions when I think a thing, but then I see different data from different populations or different input from different parts of our demographics. It causes me to think about things differently and reflect. And so I guess as we embark on this conversation around data and goals right on the cusp of our budgeting process, I want to make sure that we're doing the very best we can to come at it with every angle, every lens, every voice that's possible. And that can be hard. That can be really hard work, especially in today's very polarized climate in so many ways. And so when we look at things from a goal setting perspective, we've been using this activity with smaller subgroups, and we have more work to do, but the subgroups are looking at if schools were great in 3 years, what would it look like? So you take that presumption forward and you start thinking about what you see if you were in that space 3 years from now, and you saw the things you wanted to see in schools. And then in the next part of the conversation, and we try to capture those pieces, the next part of the conversation, we ask people, what do you see? And how did you get to that place? So if you see, one example, just great pathways for students, what does it look like? Well, it looks like a dynamic approach at Longley or other pathways at the high school for students to reach their diploma. How do we get there? Well, we had to invest in this and develop that and focus on these pieces while knowing that that's what it takes to get to those places. So just as one example, we started building this out. So I asked our business office, I asked human resources, transportation, nutrition. They're bringing that to their other groups, our management team. I've asked them to start doing this with some of their teachers. We have a list of PTO and PTA contacts we're going to do this with. We've done it with parent groups. We've done it with our affinity groups. So I've got this document that's starting to push together with input from all of these different lenses. And that will help guide my decision-making as I bring things forward to you. So when we think about the ladder of inference, the information that's coming into us, and also very much what we're going to hear tonight around this perception data that is built around those who participated and their feedback about our schools. But those who participated is an important subgroup, just like all the other subgroups. And so without further ado, I want to turn it over to Steve and Aisha to discuss our family school relationship survey from the fall.
Good evening. So I'm not going to be here long. Steve just wanted and thought it would be, excuse me, Steve just thought it would be a good idea for me to reintroduce the panorama history for those who are new. And it's been maybe a year and a half since we've begun talking about panorama. I am the SEL and Equity Resource Coordinator, as you know. I was hired February 20th. It's almost an anniversary. Hired February 1st, 2020. And at that time, we did not foresee limited access to hearing voices of our stakeholders. And for me, taking on the job and as an SEL and Equity Resource Coordinator was already a big task. However, the pandemic continues, and at that time, we needed to hear voices of our students more so than anything else. And so the Panorama SEL Wellness Survey they're usually free surveys, and you can access them for free online. However, I felt like I needed more support around the information that we get back from those surveys, and I needed a team. At that time, we did not have Steve. We also didn't have a data team to review the surveys and the survey data once we got it back, and now we do. And so this year we've introduced the family surveys as well as our staff surveys, along with the student surveys. And tonight, Steve, I'll pass it on to you.
Good evening. So I also provided you with a blue binder that's in front of you with a copy of the presentation. Some of the slides may be difficult to read from up here. So first, I'm just going to give you a little background about the survey, the purpose of our survey, what did we ask. I wanted to share with you how the survey responses were scored, as well as what our response rates were. Give you an overview of what our results were, and share with you what our families told us. And then I want to share with you how we're starting to do some planning and goal setting around those responses, and then what our next steps are. So on the third page, as you all know, helping students do their best in school, it's a team effort, and families are a very, very important part of that process. So some key areas that we wanted families' perceptions of was their school, their child, any barriers to having them be engaged with school, school safety, and the school environment. So as far as how the responses were scored, they're all reported as a % favorable. And so it doesn't matter the topic or the question, the higher the % favorable means that families report feeling more positively about a specific topic or a question that we asked. And the lower the % favorable just means that they're not feeling as positively about that. And so I gave you 2 examples. The top example is a positively framed question. And so the example question that I provided was, to what extent do you think that children enjoy going to your child's school? And so it's only the bottom 2 responses that are considered favorable. And then in a negatively framed question, it's the opposite. It would be the top 2. So for example, overall, how unsafe does your child feel at school? Does anyone have any questions about how they were scored? And so one thing, as I've been presenting each school's data with them that has come up, is the question about statistical significance of the responses that we had. So I just wanted to jump there first. So if a survey is statistically significant, it just really quantifies whether our responses are representative of our whole population. So the higher the confidence level that we want in that data, plus the lower margin of error means that those results are pretty significant. But you know, at the end of the day, I just always ask, especially on a perception survey, does that even really matter? And I just want to remind everybody that, especially for perception surveys, that the real purpose is to receive feedback and then act on that feedback. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. So on page 7, I just want to share with you the voices that we heard in the survey. So we heard 451 voices, which are out of 3,020 families district-wide. So that's just about a 15% response rate. When we're thinking about a confidence level, we set our confidence level at 95%, which is pretty standard. So what that means is we want to be 95% confident that the results are going to be the same results, even if we administered the survey 100 more times. And so as far as the district is concerned, our margin of error was 4.25%, which is pretty low. And what that means is responses that we have in here could vary either 4.25% lower or higher. And then I provided a table just so you could see how different the schools were as far as their response rates. And then just so you have a little context behind that, 3%, a 3% margin of error is considered excellent. But anywhere, especially on perception surveys, anywhere between 4 and 8% is acceptable. And so I'll give you a minute to take a look at those response rates by school. Yes.
So I'm looking at this and I see it says 451 families, but then the total families over here in the chart. Can you explain this? That like the total families, like Connors says 459 families, but I'm not.
Yes.
understanding.
So what we do in our student information system, there's data in there that links families by phone numbers or addresses. And so we can pull those by the youngest child that's in that school or the oldest child in that school. And so that's what tells us how many families are represented in that school. So it might be a little off when you're looking at each school independently, because there could be a child at Connors and Farwell and the high school. So they might not add up to exactly what we're showing just wide, just because their families represented at different schools. That's a great question. Thank you. Yes, sir.
How were families contacted with this survey?
I'm sorry.
How were families contacted with this survey? Were they?
That's a great question. So when we did the survey in November, we had it open for the month of November, and we had the schools were going to be getting responses through parent-teacher conferences in the month of November, and then families who had email addresses in our student information system were emailed separately with a separate link inviting them to respond. And then halfway through the survey, another email was sent out as a reminder if they hadn't already responded. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
No, I just wanted to say, Paul, as a parent, I received it through email and through text at least 2 or 3 different times in the month of November to fill out.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
The margins of error in the chart are quite much higher than the 4.25% you're claiming. And I'm curious how that happened.
Yeah, so it has to do with the total population that we're looking at in each of those distinct areas. So for example, we'll look at Farwell. And so Farwell has 286 families in that population. And so because we only had 12 responses, their margin of error is quite high. And if you wanted to get a lower margin of error close to what the district had, we would have needed about a 62% response rate. So it depends on the total population size. Yes, ma'am.
None of them are anywhere near 4.
No.
So how did you come up with 4 as the margin of error when none of the
higher,
schools ended up with anything close to 4? I mean, some of them are 30%.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the higher the total population, the lower number of responses that you need in order to have a lower margin of error. And so because our district's population is a little over 3,000, having 500 responses brings that margin of error quite a bit lower. So when we're looking at the district as a whole, it's the margin of error is quite a bit lower, but for any of those smaller populations, when you're looking school by school, we would need a much higher response rate in order to get a lower margin of error. And so as you can tell, like if I was at Farwell, which I've been at Farwell to present these findings, you can tell that their results are not really statistically significant. So the results that I have are not representative of the entire population, number one, and those responses could vary almost 28% either way. So when you're looking school by school, families may be telling us different things. And we just have to take a look and see, how significant is that information that we're getting. But then at the end of the day, remember that people are giving us feedback and we want to definitely listen to them. But one of our big issues, which is to your point, is that we really need to focus on getting that response rate up in every school. And as you'll notice, the high school has a little over 6% response rate. So those are the more significant when you're looking school by school. Great questions. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm assuming that these were translated into different languages and everything like we always do. Do you have any record of the feedback that we get from translated surveys versus English surveys?
Unfortunately, we don't. And that's a great question. So just so you know, as far as the surveys go, when a parent goes on, they can choose the language that they'd like. And so our top languages are in there for them to choose from. And we asked, I believe it was 46 questions. And I think that the estimated time for completion was about 16 or 17 minutes. So that's something else that we need to focus on, is narrowing down, what is it that we really want to know, and trying to reduce the number of questions on those surveys as well. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a qualitative social scientist, and it seems to me that you've gone a long way into creating numbers when really all you need is the narratives. You need the words, but I don't know if you need these numbers, because I still am not convinced that you've got a 4.25 margin of error in the big group when you have nothing like it here. So I agree, we need the information, we need the words that people say, we need the opinions. I'm not convinced we need the charts. That's me.
Thank you for your feedback. Any other questions? So I just wanted to share with you, oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, Paul.
I've also had some experience with surveys, and it seems the way the survey was submitted, which is good. Only people that are for something somewhat strongly or against something somewhat strongly would submit. I agree with member Eames on the narratives. I don't know if a 14.93 15% rate is significant enough to draw firm conclusions from the numbers itself. I am very much interested in the commentary, and I think that's the thing we really want to frame.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And, when I've been finding, as I've been meeting with schools, there are very similar concerns, because obviously with response rates lower, we want to make sure we're hearing from more families, more diverse families too. But, I wanted to at least share with you what they've said so far as we work on that, one of our largest concerns, which is increasing our response rate. And I wanted to show you on the next page, page 8, on the left, these are the number of respondents by ethnicity. And as you can see, the highest percentage of responses that we had were from families who identify as white. And on the right is Lewiston Public Schools enrollment. And as you can see, 54% of our population identifies as white, and the next largest percentage is 36% as Black and African American. So obviously, you can see from the information that a lot of our a lot of our population was not represented in this survey. And so we need to work and make sure that we can reach out to them as well. Any questions? So I love the analogy of just the temperature when I was looking at the survey information, so I wanted to share that with you. When you're thinking about temperature, really anything above 70 degrees is pretty comfortable for most people. And when you're getting to 60 to 70 degrees, it's moderately comfortable. And then when you're below 60 degrees, it's pretty chilly. And so those are the areas that I wanted to bring everyone's attention to based on what our families are telling us. So on page 10, you can see the overall results of what the categories that we asked our families. And so they go in order from the highest percent favorable to the lowest percent favorable. And so the highest percent favorable was barriers to engagement at 80% favorable. And those are just barriers for families becoming involved with schools. The next one was family support at 71% favorable. And that's the perceptions of the amount of academic and social support that they provide their child with outside of school. Family efficacy was 70%, and that means how confident families are with regard to key parenting skills. School safety was yes.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So 80% of the people that responded said that they experienced barriers to engagement?
No,
or-
it's all favorable, so that there really aren't very many barriers to them being
Got it,
involved
okay.
in the school. Great question.
Thank you.
School safety was at 61%, and that's the only one that we were able to compare to national norms. And you can see that we were between the 0 and 19th percentile as compared to schools nationally. And that's perceptions of the students' physical and psychological safety at school. And then next was school climate at 60%. And that's the perceptions of the overall social and learning climate of the school. And then school fit was 57%. And that's the family's perception of how well a school matches their child's developmental needs. And then finally, learning behaviors was 56% favorable. And that's the family's perceptions of their child's learning related behaviors. Anyone have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Were there any more topics than these 7 that are listed here that were in the survey? No.
No, but we did ask 4 free response questions, which I will share with you in a moment. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So I guess I have a question in respect to the very first one. And how can we use that as valid information with 80% in favor of barriers to engagement, barriers for families for becoming involved with schools? But when we go back to the graph to see the number of families that responded, and we see that only 5% of our people of color responded, 24. How can we know that that's accurate information? I would find that we would need, especially that particular question, we need to put that out, because those that we find that have the most barriers in our school are those with language problems not problems, excuse me, I should rephrase that, language barriers in the home and other barriers where they don't feel quite comfortable as a person of white color who has been going to, like myself, I went to Pettingill School, right? I went to Lewiston Middle School. Then my kids went to that school. I didn't feel like I had barriers in that school. I would never say that I did, but I can't say that for a friend of mine who's Somali, who moved here 20 years ago, and it's still never had that issue going into the school, right? And may feel uncomfortable going in. So I think that particular question, we really have to look at and maybe put aside and ask for more information, because I'm fearful that that is not at all accurate.
Well, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I feel like all of these questions are going to have the same concern. And I just want to reiterate the point. I mean, the purpose is just to make sure that we're transparent and sharing the results with you, especially since we just did it in November. And then I'll share with you kind of what our plan is moving forward, but I completely agree. Any other questions?
Just real quick, there's a few goals behind this, but one of them is we said up front that we were going to work to collect information before the fall, and that we would absolutely get back to you with what the results were. So what Steve's reporting is the results. But I will tell you that we all sat around the table and said, this is not representative of the makeup of our district. So he's sharing you the results, but I think he started with these percentiles and who participated and who didn't on purpose to try to set that stage that these are indeed the results, but the results only include the people who participated. And there were a lot of people who did not participate. And so this isn't the end of this work. Steve and the team have been working on new ways to engage people to try to get additional feedback this spring so we can get this to a robust place. But we're also trying to, as a district, get to a place where we have a tool that we use instead of 9 different ones. And so we don't burn people out with surveys, that we're getting this kind of feedback using a consistent platform. We're hopeful to grow that engagement, and we'll go to people to get more information as we need to, which is part of why I mentioned the smaller groups and getting their input in different areas, because obviously this is not comprehensive. He's just reporting what is available. And it's certainly absent the participation of many, many families.
Yes, ma'am.
Just real quick, as the parent who did take this survey 2 different times, it was a long survey, and perhaps this isn't the time to talk about it, maybe towards the end of your report here, but I would just put forth a suggestion that if you attempt to do a survey like this again, perhaps limit what you're asking, because it took me a half hour each time I took this survey, and I took it for each of my kids because I understand the importance of it. But I don't think a lot of people necessarily understand the importance of why the survey went out and what the district is trying to collect with it. So I would just suggest a more condensed version of this, and perhaps elaborate further on into the school year, ask questions based off of what you've already learned. I mean, I don't know, but just a suggestion.
No, I appreciate that, and I agree with you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So I am also a parent that took the survey, and my student goes to McMahon. And I do know that it was kind of surrounded around parent-teacher conference, and Charlotte and I, our principal at McMahon, had laptops set out in the entryway as parents were coming in to attend their parent-teacher conference, to have them fill out the survey at that time. So again, I don't know if you're planning on doing this again. Maybe it's also a time, maybe we try and shoot for that time, because the parents are coming in anyway. So that could potentially be part of their parent-teacher conference, to engage them and get them to do it. If it's right there in front of them and it's easily accessible, it could be another option.
Yeah, thank you. And our goal is to work on reducing the survey significantly. And then our first parent conferences, I believe it starts with the high school, I think March 15th. And so the plan is to open the survey window 1 week prior to conferences and have them go right through April vacation. So thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm quite concerned that it's computer-based, because even if it's translated into other languages, there are still a substantial number of people in this city who aren't going to be easily attracted to a computer in the hallway. So I just think that that's one piece, but we need to do a little extra work to find, I'm sure you're thinking about this, to find the ways to get people who didn't naturally gravitate towards answering a survey on a computer to answer something.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Have you guys ever thought about partnering with local organizations that have community events? For example, sometimes there's events at the Pug, and maybe have some people there asking questions to people in the community. I just feel like that's a really good way to get voices heard.
So I step back up because I feel like, I thought the questions would come toward the end of it, and y'all are asking the questions that would come to me. So I felt I'd come up here and save him. Most of the information, just as the process for getting our students engaged and involved with having their voices heard and actually responding to it, it was a long process of organizing, finding out what we are used to, what we can do, what we should do. And then we added on 2 additional stakeholder pieces to the puzzle. And so at right now, all of the things you're saying, I'm sitting back there, shaking in my seat, because I know that these things these are things that our data team has already thought about. I know Jake mentioned the small groups. We've already talked about, okay, how are we going to have small discussion groups so that we can take this away from the computer and actually have a discussion about the questions that we asked on the survey. So all of these things are in play. And like I said, now we have a team. It's not just Aisha doing all of it. It's a data team that are asking all of the questions that you're asking and coming up with plans to target the marginalized groups that we didn't receive survey results from, finding out what questions are important to us to ask so that we're not asking 100 questions. I too have 3 students and I'm also an employee for Lewiston Public Schools. So it was really hard to do it, but the questions were all really important. So it's hard to know which ones to leave out and what voices need to be heard and who's not being heard. So I just wanted to step in and say that the SEL and Equity Resource Coordinator, I'm working alongside as his wing person to make sure that we're doing all that we need to do to organize, getting voices heard in an equitable way. So any more questions? I'm still back here waiting for y'all.
Thank you. Any other questions? So I did want to share with you some information. This is the same information, but it's broken down by grade level. So you can see what the responses look like as far as the percent favorable for each of the topics that go across the top. The darker the green color, the more favorable the responses were compared to the district average. And the darker the orange color, the less favorable they were from the district. And so if you remember looking at the response rate by schools, really the only one that was considered, even remotely, I wouldn't even use the word significant, but better was the upper grades in the high school. Did anyone have any questions?
So as we think about this, and when I shared the ladder of inference, knowing that we have our own thoughts, we have our own lived experience, and then we start getting into data and looking at data, and we know one of the key takeaways of this presentation on Steve's second slide maybe was the lack of participation. So we know what we're missing. And I think while that's not ideal, it's important that we're saying that out loud. But I also want to point out that those darker oranges, especially at the high school or the middle through high school level, now, again, limited input, but the input we do have expresses school climate and school safety as areas that our 7th through 12th grade families are expressing and talking about. So while we can't take big certainties out of this, we can take trends, we can take the information that was provided while knowing that we missed or didn't get input from the big population.
Thank you. And then the next slide, I just wanted to provide you with what the response rate, what the responses looked like by school. Did anyone have any questions? And then, so if you remember me referencing the temperature, so the bottom 4 areas that were below 60% were learning behaviors, school fit, school climate, and school safety. And that's on slide 13. And what I provided you with is the percent favorable score for each of the questions that we asked, so that you have an opportunity to see exactly what we did ask under all of those topics. So if you want to take a few minutes to read through those. Yes, yes, ma'am.
So are these, like, let's just say, how often do you worry about violence at your child's school? 42% are worried about it, or 42% are not worried?
42% are not worried.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. And so definitely the higher, no matter what the topic or question, the higher their percent favorable, the more positive families felt about what we asked. Yes.
So I guess, looking at this, either of the former tables, the previous ones, it looked like the middle school, like school safety and school climate were a big concern. But then when you flip to this page, it looks like it's not a big concern at all. So I guess it's like conflicting data.
So, so this one is district-wide.
Okay.
And the other one was more grade level and school level specific. So we can kind of see, based on the percent favorable district-wide, are there any schools, are there any grade levels? Are there any topics that are more of a concern than others at each of those different schools? Thank you. Any other questions? And so the next couple of pages are all of the free response questions that we had asked. And so I just wanted to share with you how I categorize those. So we had just under 800 free responses to our questions. And for each of those questions, I read through each one and I tried to come up with, a few words that could best describe what the major theme of that response was. And so how the next 4 slides are set up for you is overall, the highest was 13%. So 13% of the responses to ideas about improving the district were positive. 11% were about improving communication. 11% had to do with school safety, and 9% had to do with school discipline. And so I pulled out some of the comments that families had shared with us, so you can kind of get an idea of what families throughout the district had said, if you want to take a couple minutes to read through those. And then the next slide, we had asked about families' ideas about improving the social climate of the school or district. And 33% of the responses had to do with school discipline. 11% were about building more community. 10% were about cultural diversity and equity and inclusion. And 7% were about parent partnerships and social emotional learning. And then on the next page, page 16, these were responses about ideas about engaging more parents. 20% were about better communication. 19% were about having more activities and events. 10% were about inviting families in and volunteer opportunities. And 8% were about parent partnerships. And on slide 17, the final question that we asked, we're just getting their ideas about how the school or district could help children engage more productively at home. And again, 16% was about better communication. 16% was about having their students have more meaningful work. 9% were about meeting students' needs. And 7% was about having more homework. Did anyone have any questions? And then I just wanted to quickly share with you kind of how we've been working on doing some planning and goal setting. And what we wanted to focus on were, what are the topics or questions that we should definitely focus our time and attention on. And then just try to really clarify what is it that family members are asking us to do. And trying to brainstorm how can we address what they need and then come up with our recommendation. But we quickly realized after looking at response rates that our focus really needs to be on response rate. So that's what we're currently working on problem solving. And then obviously we want to be transparent and at least share what we have for results so far. And so our next steps is the first step is sharing the results, which is what we're in the process of doing, not only here, but throughout each of the buildings. And as Jake and Aisha said, getting some focus groups responses for those underrepresented populations that we have. And we're going to use the data that we have as we're working on our current goals and plans. And then again, we're doing our spring survey, and hopefully we'll be able to get that survey much shorter and have a better way to reach more people. And then obviously continue to share the results and continue to use data in our goal setting and to just get better. Did anyone have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I understand that it was a small percentage that gave feedback on this survey and, but I'm not convinced that if, all 3,000 families took this survey, that the concerns in the middle school and high school would be much different as far as school climate and school safety. And so I almost think that that's something that even with a little bit of information needs to be addressed now. So I don't know if that's something that you guys are starting to look at, or if it's something the superintendent's starting to really focus on, because this is really concerning to me personally.
Well, and that's one thing, I mean, in my personal opinion about a perception survey, I understand our response rate's small and it doesn't represent all of our population, but it's still voices. And there are common themes that we really do need to start paying attention to. And so, I guess the good news is between now and March, we'll have some focus groups to get more information. And then March is our next survey window to get even more information. And I think the culmination of all of those pieces will really help us in goal setting and planning. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, Megan.
Following up on what Janet was saying, some of these things sound like relatively simple things that could be put into place, like the text alert number, so students who feel they're not safe can send a tip to the school office. Is that something that could be implemented? It sounds like something that could be implemented really quickly. Are there little things that we can find in here that we can start a little bit sooner than digging deeper?
I think there's lots of things that are possible. I don't know. I've not researched the text piece. I would assume someone has to monitor that as well. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do that we need to look into. I'll also add that a lot of things that we want to do cost money. And so once we try to do so many things, we're going to have to try to maximize whatever funds we do dedicate to this kind of effort.
But the intention of this was to find solutions. We just might have to wait a little bit longer for those.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So I just want to follow up with what was just said by both of my cohorts here. I think this is, and with budget season coming up, I really do think that if there's any way that we can find something that goes into what we saw was what, even though this was just like 451 families is still a lot of families. It's, I mean, it's only 451 out of 3,000, but when we saw predominantly what you showed was the safety issues at the schools, I think it's something, and with budget season, with the conversation coming up with the city council on Thursday, I know that that was one of the biggest issues that they had talked about too, is some of the things that they had heard when they were knocking on doors and campaigning this summer. So I would concur, if there's a way that we can do this and find a way, I know that I will happily fight at city council level to say that this is something we need in our budget and we need to work on, because I don't think that this is something that we can ignore or wait until we have further information. And I want to tell you that I think this is a phenomenal thing that you're doing. And I'm glad that this survey went out and that we're working towards these goals. But I think that if there's a way that we can work on some of them immediately versus waiting another year or next school season, we really need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Referencing Member Ames's earlier comment about a qualitative study, the real diamonds in here are the comments. And we have to really understand that perception is reality for the people that had written that. I think, again, the task of this committee is somehow to prioritize, as we said, with the expediency of an issue, the time to enact it, the cost to enact it, and we better be aware that we're not going to be able to solve every problem easily on this. As you know, wise man once said, sometimes it's better to wear slippers than try to carpet the world. I don't think we can, you know, go off and charge at windmills here. Is every comment legitimate? You bet it is. But solve the problems is really going to be which problems do we want to focus on, which are the most important.
Thank
Good
you.
job. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so very much for your time. Oh, sorry.
Let me just say thank you so much. I know how much work this is, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Aisha. The next item, item 7, is to receive and approve training for the use of Narcan if necessary in the Lewiston Public Schools.
So I'll get things started on this agenda item, but I know that we also have Vicki Wigman here, who's our district. She's based out of the high school, but does lots of things around wellness for our students, but she's our substance use prevention coordinator. I probably got her title slightly wrong, but Vicki wears a lot of hats for our district, but she really is focused on student wellness and the prevention of things. So Vicki, feel free to jump up anytime if you want to share some information. I did share out a memo to all of you in the packet. And just to summarize the memo for those who might be listening or watching this later, the reality of substance use and overdose in our world today is as real as it's ever been. I think I shared in the memo a piece of a story from a few years back of a student that had a bad reaction in the classroom to something that he had eaten on the way to school or before leaving for school with some friends, had a very serious reaction to it, required medical intervention. But I think of the reality of addiction. And we can't just control it. And we can't expect that everyone else can just choose not to do certain things if they've become addicted to a substance or substances. And so Narcan has developed as a tool that I think a few years back, some people had and some people used, and then it just became so widely used or available, I should say, but also used by medical professionals, law enforcement. You can actually get them now, and just there are some out there who recommend you have the doses available in a home or in every medical kit, every first aid kit, because wherever people gather, wherever people could congregate and or go for help, you could have this situation come up. And the downfall to using Narcan to treat something or a situation that appears to be an overdose doesn't have big negative consequences, which is one of the few times that we see treatments that, well, if you treat for the wrong thing, all these other things could go wrong. Narcan, at least evidence to date, is telling us that you can actually give it to someone you think is having an overdose, and it doesn't have big adverse effects on them if they're not having an overdose. So it's not something we've had in schools to date, at least not through like our nurse's office or something to that effect. But we've been talking about this for some time. I supported as a high school principal, and that was now 2 years ago. But we hadn't quite crossed that bridge. I think with 2 more years of use, the pandemic, the reality of the data of the number of people that are addicted, the number of school-age students that are dying nationwide due to overdoses, and so many other factors, that my recommendation is that we start taking the steps as a district to have these doses available to our medical staff and our administration, and obviously train them for use of them. But I do think it's school committee action to take that next step. And I'm sure Vicky has all kinds of much better spoken, more information around Narcan and the use of things for overdoses in our schools.
Hi there. I am Vicki Wigman, Substance Use Prevention Coordinator and Counselor for the district based out of the high school. And actually, Superintendent Langlis, I got out my Narcan binder that I actually started in 2018. So these have been things that I've been thinking about for a while, feeling that there is not a downside to this. We are, many of our schools are strong community centers. I had taken a statistic from the Lewiston Area Public Health Committee a month and a half ago, a meeting, that there have been 24 deaths in Lewiston alone between January and September. Today in the Sun Journal, there was an article, you may have seen it, about a teen's overdose in Connecticut. These can be, I don't want to paint a picture that all of our students are using this class of drugs, but things can happen by accident. We could be talking about an adult who's in our school for whatever reason. And to me, in the research that I've done, there is not a downside to having naloxone Narcan in the school. I think it's not a cost issue. I had asked a question of Corey Brown at Healthy Androscoggin, and she gave me a list of local agencies that are both doing training and helping to access Narcan. And it addresses the reality that brain damage and death can start happening in a very short amount of time. The last time this came up, there was conversation that our resource officers carry Narcan. They do, but are they involved in something else? Are they not in the building right at that time? So yeah, more than giving you a bunch of facts, I just fully support this. I had sent an email. I'm driving to school the other day, and this is my 35th school year here in this position. And I'm thinking, I'm just going to go for it again. Sent Superintendent Langlis an email, and this had been going on, behind the scenes. So I just feel the time's right for us to take this step. This notebook I have is a kit from a task force of national school nurses, and our past head of school nurses had been a part of this. And our current head of school nurses at the state has been very encouraging to me and to us to continue to pursue, this, having Narcan in the district. sourcing it certainly for medical personnel and any logical people that could be trained. The training is very simple. So yeah, I'm happy to field whatever questions I can, but I really think that we should do this. I do.
Well,
Who would be trained and authorized to administer Narcan in that district?
Well, I think that would be something that we could pretty easily take on in our planning, and who do folks at the school think should be trained? Clearly school nurses, some schools do, school administrators, do you have athletic directors, do you have other, volunteer staff members have it available, just as we have folks who could use an AED if they needed to. So I think that's something the school would need to decide, but those are some suggestions. Yeah.
And if I could add, at least my initial perception was, or my thoughts were, the appropriate members of the staff. So nurses, administrators, other folks that might be around it, like, Vicky would be one, obviously, because she has students come to her with those kinds of concerns specifically, whether it's for themselves or others. So I would think it to be appropriate staff, but I also feel like there's a bit of a Good Samaritan clause to this. I wouldn't oppose or object to any staff that wish to getting the exposure training, as long as we can afford the training, which doesn't sound to be expensive if have cost at all. So that they could also be certified to do so. Each year, we have to gather the data with how many people in each school are certified to use like an AED. And there's actually a reporting structure for that. So to me, I see this as something similar to that. We don't require people to be trained to use a defibrillator, but we do track those who are able to, just to make sure that we have some that are spread out that could do so. So I like your question, but I also want to chime in with, I think we'd have a scope to begin with, and then with the idea that it's a nasal spray. If someone thinks someone's having an overdose, they could know where it is in the building, like an AED, get to it and administer it if they needed to.
Paul.
Follow that up. I'm sorry. Cut you, Megan. I have to ask the question, what is the projected cost of this?
So would you mind just going up to the podium, just so if anybody else is listening or watches later, they can hear you.
And did Officer Burkhart mention to you? So
Yes.
I'm like, is that Officer Burkhart's guy?
And I apologize. If you wouldn't mind introducing
Sure.
yourself.
My name's David Bilodeau. I work with Tri-County Mental Health Services, and I'm the options liaison for Androscoggin County, which means I work with every police department in Androscoggin County following up on overdoses. Just for information, last week in Lewiston, 15 that we know of, that were reported. So you can imagine there was plenty more. The cost of the training would be nothing to you. If you're talking 25 people or less, I would do the training. If it's more than that, the state would rather do the training themselves, but again, at no cost to you. And the cost of the Narcan, depending on what you want. If you want a dozen containers which have 2 Narcans each, I can give them to you and I can replace them whenever you use them. If you're looking at getting 100 to cover everybody, more teachers, then the state would get them for you. But again, I've already talked to the state at no cost to you. The training's about a half an hour. It's really simple. And it really stresses a lot of the Good Samaritan side of it. You cannot be sued for doing it. They've got studies with infants that they gave Narcan to that they thought had overdosed, gotten some of the parent stuff, and it doesn't do any harm if you don't have any overdose with you. I carry some with me at all times. It's at my house. It's in my car because you never know when it's going to happen. Like I said, the training's a half an hour. I can do it by Zoom. I can do it in person. I'd rather do it in person, but I can do it by Zoom if you prefer. And again, no cost whatsoever to you. We'll do everything we can, and the state has assured me through Governor Mills that we will do anything you want for as many people as you want.
And we've worked with David in some other school situations, we'll call them. He's been very helpful both with information and into those situations. So thank you for that. I apologize, I didn't recall your first name. If we were to buy them, if it came to that, my understanding is that these are pretty inexpensive doses. I think that just doing some quick looking around, I saw things around $15. Then that's for a 2-pack. Member Parks just shared. So at $7.50, just to have some of this on hand, I guess from my perspective, every year we buy things for our nurses stations, gauze, Band-Aids, Tylenol, those kinds of things that we have on hand as part of our operating costs. And to me, I don't think we need a massive stock of these things. We just need to monitor expiration dates if that's a in effect component of it, and it's just something that we have available.
There's about a 2-year lifespan. And there's no real studies to say it don't work after 2 years, but this is just safety. They give you 2 years license. So if I gave them to you today, you'd have 2 years before they run out. And if they run out, you call me and I'll just replace them all again. And as long as we have the same people in office, Governor Mills is really pushing the options program. This will not run out. It will never cost you. We will be there every step of the way. One of the things I wanted to stress, and it's something that I'm seeing recently, and I'm glad you're here. We are running into marijuana laced with fentanyl in Lewiston. So a kid who just smokes a little pot can have an overdose. I've dealt with last week a 75-year-old man who screamed and hollered at me that he never took drugs in his life. He just smoked a little pot and he overdosed because the pot was laced with fentanyl. That's a big concern because even if the children aren't doing opiates and aren't shooting up, if they smoke the wrong joint, they could overdose. And it's growing. The numbers are getting scary. And again, take advantage of it. If I'll do it for free. I mean, I'll work my schedule around whatever you want to do.
Megan?
Is this something that is just at the high school? Is this something that we're not going to offer at the middle school? Is this something that we're offering at the elementary school? Like, what are the parameters of where we're going to offer this?
My initial thinking is every school department building, even our central office, because it's not necessarily that the kids are going to show up with something, but they could. Parents come into the building, pretty frequent volume of people that are in and out of our schools, and notwithstanding staff. So we have adults around too, and I don't know the data offhand, and I don't know if it's something that either Megan or Vicky could speak to, or even David, but the youth component of this is extremely real, and it's leaving me concerned. And one of the things that I had to think about when we first started talking about this a few years back was, is it an invitation? So if you have it on site, does it invite people to that space to seek help? And the reality is they may do that anyway because it's a school. But I think it's just so prevalent at this point in our society. Those who are around or know someone who has overdosed, they're keeping it. Like David said, he sees it because of the nature of his work, but he has it in his car, on him, at home. There's a lot of people that are taking that approach now. So training would be for adults. I don't think we're looking to train students. My guess is, are you taking something out?
I mean,
Megan has one with her now.
And then are we going to, I'm not saying that like capping it at a certain number of faculty or staff is a bad thing, but is there going to be, like, I feel like we should have some parameters as like each school has 15 people trained, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, we don't want one school to only have 2 people trained that are willing to train. We don't want another school to have 50 people that are trained. Like, is there a way that we can monitor, or like I said, I don't want to say like set a cap, but like have some parameters around how many are required to be trained at each school? Like, I don't know.
No, I think it's a good question. So I don't have a vision of getting everyone trained. I think if people want to be trained, it would be optional. I don't have any intention of it being mandatory for staff outside of, say, nurses, who probably are all pretty close. It'd be easy for them because the work that they do. Our administrators, school counselors as appropriate. To me, feels like that's that realm as a district of us saying, we're going to make a concerted effort to get that core people. But if there are others that spill over, athletic director, after school program coordinator, or something like that, again, not to make it mandatory, but if it's available and the training is optional and people choose to do it outside of that scope, I would be okay with it.
The other thing is there's a train the trainer training, which is in all honesty, basically the same training, except they make you do it. You got to get up and speak and do the training. The school department could do that. You could have one person in each school be a train the trainer that could then you can then do your own training.
Janet?
I mean, I don't mind. I'll train every school. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. But I'm just saying, you can pick somebody from each school to do the trainer training, and then you get somebody trained that can train all year long.
Thank you. So when I initially read this in the packet, my gut feeling was like, oh gosh, here we're talking about this. And I did a quick Google search just to see, and the only data I could find on with the state of Maine as far as overdoses go, because my initial thought was, oh my, are we having an overdose problem among our school-age children? Is this a thing? The data that I found was from January 2019 to April of 2021. So it's missing almost an entire year's worth of data. But in that data, I found that there were only 2 people who had OD'd ages 18 and younger in that time period. And it was, both of those were in the year of 2020, when we really didn't have a lot of school and we knew the mental health of our kids was rough anyway. So my initial reaction was like, wow, is this a solution to a problem that we're like looking for? Like, what is actually going on? So I decided to do some more research, and I reached out to Lewiston police today and had a conversation about it. And my mind was actually really changed, because at first I was a little hesitant about this. Like I said, the concern that you brought up, like, is this an open invitation? Sort of like oh, I really shouldn't do this before I go to school, but I know they carry Narcan, so maybe I'll just, risk it. That was kind of my initial fear when I read this. And then in speaking to a police officer today, it sounds like exactly what this gentleman said, that a lot of things are being laced with fentanyl now. And where it's not overwhelming in Lewiston yet, it's working its way towards that problem. We know that a lot of the drugs in this state come from out of state, come from New York, come from Boston, come from those areas, and they are being laced with fentanyl. And hearing that it's now in marijuana is really scary, because that's something that's just become recreational in this area, and you just never know. So where I was feeling really hesitant about this, just because I don't feel like it's a problem with school-age children. I do see the benefits of it, and I will support this.
Paul?
Yeah, you brought the timeliness up about the 13-year-old in Connecticut of a somewhat higher socioeconomic area than ours, but also the recent drug bust. I don't want to laugh at the county building, where they tried to bail someone out and didn't work out. They searched the car, and my God, the multi-grams. I see this. Thank you for bringing this up, everyone, as important as having defibrillators in schools. It's right up there. I really would support it. And I guess I'd say somewhat humorously that anyone that doesn't support this needs a checkup from the neck up. I mean, this is just a slam dunk in my opinion.
And we absolutely need to think of not just school-age children, but our buildings as community centers, and may we never, ever, ever have to use them. And I had thought between 4 years ago and now, I really hope this is not, hey, we really should have done it, because those are horrendous lessons to learn. You think accidental exposures, kids, adults, everybody. Yeah.
I mean, a good example. I just trained the entire ski patrol up at Lost Valley. These are people that have a higher social economic. They had 3 overdoses last year while people were skiing. So when I started doing this 15 years ago, I was working more with homeless people that had no jobs. It's not that way anymore. The numbers are growing. The biggest rise I've seen, believe it or not, is cocaine mixed with fentanyl. Now, these are people that have their own house, their own cars, some of them their own businesses, and, they're overdosing. It's growing, and like you said, rather have it and never use it. But if you used it once in 10 years and saved one kid's life, that could be your kid. That could be my kid. I can't say enough how strongly I recommend, having it on hand. And we've gone around and put up what we call them the locks boxes. They look like a fire alarm, and they have the locks in it. And anybody can get it that needs it. You open it and an alarm goes off, and when you hear the alarm, you call the police and get an ambulance here. I don't know that any of them boxes has been opened, but I can tell you the number of conversations that they've generated and the number of mothers and grandmothers that have come to us and said, can I get some of that for my house? It's growing. My initial thoughts when we first did it was what some people are thinking. Is this going to make people use it more because they know it's there? Well, if it does, it does. But still, if we save one life, that could be your kid, that could be my kid. It's worth the risk. And it can't be abused. It's not like somebody can take it and get high on it. It's not gonna.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you. I just want to say that I'm completely in favor of this. I see this as having Band-Aids and a first aid kit at a football game and just being prepared and capable. As you just stated, if this saves one person in 10 years, then we just did our job, honestly. Somebody that's a full-time caregiver, not so much anymore because he's doing much better, but I had to be trained with Narcan. I have Narcan in my car. I have it in my house. My husband had to have serious medication and opiates for his pain and for the operations. It's not that hard. The training was like a blink of an eye compared to other training. It is nothing. And I think that this is absolutely something that I think that we should have had it already, to be honest with you, but absolutely in favor of this. Thank you.
Yes, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this initiative. I really think it's essential that we supply the safety net in the school, and especially at such a low cost. I mean, wow. And the one hesitation I had was that the example you gave of somebody who had, I guess it was synthetic marijuana, and so they were seizing, but it wasn't opiates. But I did look at the medical literature. I did go down a rabbit hole with the medical literature, and there is no downside to, as people have already said, to using this. If it's not an opiate receptor that needs to be cut, it doesn't harm anyone. So I think that's an important thing to make sure everyone hears.
Ms. Whitlow?
Thank you both for presenting and answering questions. I'm actually shocked that we haven't had this in our schools already. And this is my 3rd term on the school board, and I don't recall ever having a presentation since I've been here for the last 4 years. Maybe we have, but I don't recall it. So I would like to just go ahead and make the motion, if that's all right. I'm going to make a motion to receive and approve training for and use of Narcan if necessary at Lewiston Public Schools.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Whitlow, seconded by Ms. Medina. Is there any further discussion? I guess I haven't said much about this, but I'm fully in support of this. And what I guess the way I look at this is, if you know CPR, the more people that know CPR, the better your chances if you have a heart attack, which I have had one, that somebody might be able to help you. And I think that's sort of the same thing here. The more people that are trained, that recognize it, that could save you, the better off we are. I think it's just, especially with everything that's going on today in this crazy world, that the more people that have it and have the training. And thank you, Mr. Bullier, for all of your work so far and the offer. That's greatly appreciated. So we have a motion before us. Is there other comments? Ms. Parks?
Sorry, well, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I think a lot of the things that I wrote down have already been said. In addition to Dave offering to do the training, I think it would be good if we could send out notification district-wide to let teachers know there's a variety of online training options that are free. So if the teacher isn't able to participate in one of the ones that are held in the school, but they want to be trained whether while they're in the school or in the community, Main Access Points is a really good one. They will do group online trainings or in-person trainings, individual trainings, takes about half an hour, 45 minutes, and then they certify you, and they will also send individuals at their home or at the school or wherever a free supply of Narcan. And so that is one of a variety of, and I can get you a list of more if you'd like, training options for people to do on their own. So even if they're not getting trained at the district level, they can do it on their own time as well. And I think that's really important. Yes, they're free trainings. Yep.
Great, thank you. Other comments?
So I'd just like to
Yes,
say,
sir.
I'll leave my card with the superintendent
That'd be
and
great.
with
That'd
you.
be great.
And just give me a call, and whatever it is, whether it's me or whether it's the state get involved, I'll get it done. Megan's working before, you worked before. When I tell you I'm gonna get it done, I'll get it done. I've been doing this for 15 years and I really see the change, and the more people we get trained. And again, I hope you never use it. But if it happens, if one person saved, it's worth it. And if any of you get somebody that comes up to you and fights it, simple thing, this was my instructor in college looked at me and said, if your granddaughter or your daughter dropped down, would you want me to treat her? Would you want me to save her? Ain't one person gonna say no. And it's just that simple. So I'm glad it's a conversation now. And like I said, I'll leave my card with you and you, and
Great, thank you.
Megan knows me very well too. Just give me a call.
Thank you very
Thank you
much,
so
David.
much.
Appreciate it.
Ashley?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here and for being an advocate. I mean, it's one of those conversations that's like, ouch, we're having this conversation, but it's so real, and addiction does not discriminate. So thank you so much.
And I'd like to obviously thank Dave for coming tonight to take time out of his schedule to share this information. But I also want to thank Vicky publicly for not just this effort, but so many other things that she's done. Vicky, how many years have you served Lewis Public School students?
So this is my 35th.
35 years of advocating for the health and well-being of our
I
students.
was 4
and
when
our
I
staff.
started.
The work Vicky has done for both our students and our staff is really admirable. I consider Vicky to be a colleague, a true professional, and someone who, when she sends a message or makes a call or shoots me a text or something, I'm listening, because she usually has ideas that are going to help the well-being of our schools as a whole. So Vicky, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay.
Most days.
So votes tonight will start with Ward 2, Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3.
Yes.
I'm yes. Ward
Ye-
4.
Yes.
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 Okay, that's your, yes. That's,
Yes.
Many thanks, all of you.
next item on the agenda is a report from school committee chair. I don't have anything to report since our last meeting. The next item is number 9, which would be his report from the school superintendent.
A few things, just a reminder that it's been very challenging to get all the dates together for so many people, but Thursday we will have a joint meeting. Bruce will actually, sorry, Chair Damon will preside over things just to have some structure. But it'll be a good opportunity to hear what people are passionate about, some things that they'd like to share and talk about, and really working together with the city council to build that model that we're gonna keep working forward with as it relates to wants for our community and the direction that we're headed. So we look forward to that. Yes, that will be at the Green Ladle. We're looking at a 5:30 arrival. Dinner will probably closer to 6 or just after. We're trying to be mindful about spacing and also about a member or two that will be coming in a bit later because of their schedule. So we'll facilitate that. Actually, the other piece I had, we had touched on, so I'll stop with that for now. And we have another meeting coming up on the 7th, so we can share more there.
Great, thank you, Jake. Yes, Megan.
I just noticed that we're missing the update from the school committee city council rep on the agenda. Is that intentional? Because normally we have that.
I don't know if we're just giving her a break or if it's just.
Actually, I think there was an oversight because we shifted to updates from school committee subcommittees instead of listing each individual one, which was a piece of input. So I'll make sure that that gets back on. But I did.
Well, certainly we would recognize Member Scott for your
Thank you.
update.
I just wanted to talk about that last week, the city council voted in favor unanimously to go into a lease agreement with the Boys and Girls Club to have that starting at the Armory. The Boys and Girls Club will be renting out the space there. They will be doing improvements there. And this is actually a pretty exciting thing. It's a 6.5-year agreement, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to extend it after that. I think it's going to be very good for our school department and for the kids for after school programming. They're looking at all sorts of different things to really bring in, and where that spot is like perfect for the middle school. So, and that was all I had.
And just to add to that, working with the new rec director has been pleasant, very pleasant. She's great. We've already collaborated on a few different things. So where they're using some of the Armory space to do different things, Boys and Girls Club and all kinds of planning of their own, they've reached out and said, hey, can we use the stage at the middle school? Can we use the gym at these times? And we're really working together, coordinate, because the idea that we have our lights on and our floors and surfaces available for kids nights, weekends, as much as we possibly can, that's our goal. And they've been great to work with. So just want to share that.
Mr. Bopalong.
Just clarification on that. Is this in addition to the established program in Auburn, or is it replacing it?
It's in addition to.
Ms. Scott, is this going to have an interconnection with the major renovation the city is doing of the Armory, or is this going to be dovetailed with it or in conflict with it?
This is going to be in dovetail with it. So the city has their own things that they need to do. Unfortunately, that beautiful building, and it is in great shape. I just took a tour a couple of weeks ago, has a serious flooding issue at the bottom part. And so that has really affected the locker rooms and that sort of thing. So for the new Maples coming in, for the basketball team coming in, that's renovation that's going to be done. But this is separate in and of itself of that. And that is actually, the agreement was made that the Boys and Girls Club are going to be bringing in some of their grant funding money to do the renovation work on their part of the building, which will mitigate some of the costs for us. So that's good.
To follow up on Member Beaumont's question, when the pandemic started, they stopped the grades 7 through 12 programming at the Auburn Boys and Girls Club, and they switched more to supporting kids who were learning remotely. So this will restore the middle school through high school programming for Lewiston and Auburn Armory, and then they'll be able to expand more into the space in Auburn for the younger grades and continue that programming. So this is just going to benefit it a little bit more.
Anything else from folks? Next item would be school committee community announcements. Seeing none. Whoop, Janet.
Well, I just think it's worth mentioning, the high school's new addition was all moved into today. Am I right?
All of it?
Wait, well, the front office was moved back to the front of the school. Yes, awesome. So yeah, it sounds like there's some big moves happening, and maybe a little bit of normalcy with drop off and pick up will resume at the high school. And yeah, so I just thought that was good news. I mean, I know the high school families got that notification, but I'm not sure the rest of the community got that notification.
And Tyler, would you like to speak to that at all, since you're here? I mean, rather than just leave you sitting over there in the corner.
So, I mean, you guys know it's been going on for a while. Mr. Dufour has poured his blood, sweat, and tears into this project, along with a lot of community members. Very excited for tomorrow for the kids. Like you mentioned, it's a cultural climate change when you have something new like this and that you can celebrate it. It's the arts. And if you know anything about the arts, or you've ever appreciated going to any type of museum or anything like that, I encourage you to come and take a tour of this new wing. It is beautiful. I've walked it. It made me feel like it's a college, honestly. It's going to be some time to make sure everything's working perfectly. I went into the band room today and they were very excited. However, the temperature was at 57 degrees because we had some heating issues. So there's going to be bumps on the road. We understand that, but we have a staff that's very flexible, that's very willing to work with us as leadership. And because we have those type of people in our schools, we're encouraged that the kids are going to buy right into what we have, and it is going to affect our climate and our culture positively. So very excited. Like I said, I think the real community celebration is going to be at the end of March. I've been in contact with Susan Collins's office. She wants to come and take a look at it. So definitely a lot of buzz in the state, and it's just a moment that we all can be proud of for tomorrow as you're waking up. Think about those kids going into a brand new part of a high school. Thanks.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Janet, for bringing that up. That is, it is been 4.5 years in the making. So, next item would be future agenda items. Yes, Ms. Ames.
Thank you. It's come to my attention through some community talk that there's some very depressed and demoralized students who are worried that they're not going to be graduating on track because of the pandemic. And so I'm wondering if we can put something on a future agenda that has to do with graduation, people being on track to graduation, if you understand my question. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Bowden?
I was kind of hoping we could, and maybe this is premature, but maybe rediscuss the pool testing that we're doing in the schools, where we're no longer contact tracing. And it just seems like a lot of time and resources for our schools and our nurses and our staff that perhaps really isn't needed anymore in this school year. I could be wrong with that, but it seems like where we've taken some different approaches with CDC recommendations. I just don't know how effective the pool testing is at this point.
Okay, thank you. Others? Paul?
Thank you. I'd like some discussion on the Pledge of Allegiance issue that was brought up tonight.
Megan?
I was going to ask if we could send that to the policy subcommittee to review or have a future discussion on the same subject.
I would think, since it's the current policy, that would go to the policy committee first, and then after it's been vetted there, that it would come back with some sort of recommendation from the policy committee. I think, unless others feel differently, I think it should go that way. Ms. Whitlow?
No, I think that might be the best approach, but I think there's things in there that are more than just policy to be discussed. And I think that the whole school board definitely should be weighing in. I personally think that it should be a workshop. You know, I've had my concerns about the Pledge of Allegiance, but I've been kind of hushed because of the word God in there, and how that just seems inappropriate when not everybody believes in God when you're made to do that. So I think that this is a bigger concern, a bigger discussion. And I think this could be a very heated topic. But I think it's something that should be brought forward too for workshop.
Yeah, I am curious about policy approach, because one of the things that I noticed with the example the student shared was that it was last reviewed in 2012. And so with constantly changing law and language, one of the things I think we should do in a workshop is invite those who want to share that voice, but also get an updated, even if it's a template of modern current law, to make sure that we're looking at the right thing. And I think that that would probably give the policy subcommittee enough information to get the input, see what should be there if it were renewed, and then have that subcommittee work done.
Just as a newbie, can I just ask something?
Certainly.
Something goes to the policy or subcommittee, doesn't it, won't it come back to the big group at some point? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, after the committee's done, after they've had a chance to vet it and maybe potentially rewrite it, they'd come back with new language, strike out and a new language so that it becomes an accepted policy that's, part of the policy manual. Megan?
Whether it goes to the policy committee first or goes to workshop first, I don't know that one is more important than the other, but I think that updating it as soon as possible, because we're very out of date. It's a very out of date policy, and clearly it's a concern for people. So I think whichever, the chicken or the egg, whichever one comes first, I don't know if it super matters a lot, but I think it's something that we should make a priority.
Yeah, I guess my thinking is that if the policy committee takes it and does the rewrite, then when we do the workshop and when we have the vote, we don't then have to go back and do all that afterwards to get it right. I would think that the committee it would make sense to have the committee, at least vet the language and make a recommendation for the change in the language. And then when we do the workshop, if there are changes that we think need to be made to that language, we could do it and then have a first vote. That would
I agree.
be what I would think might work best as far as if you're looking to try to speed it up. Other future agenda items. Omar, did you have anything that you would like to report to us from your perspective at the high school?
As of right now, there's nothing in particular. Definitely a lot of the stuff that has been brought up today are definitely concerns, either it being part of the survey we did with a lot of the safety and climate issues. Those are definitely things I've seen. The Pledge of Allegiance is something I've experienced as well. That's definitely something we should talk about at some point. And what was the issue that you brought up we should do for agenda? Yes, that as well. That is something that I've seen a lot, especially being somebody who tries to be more involved with his school and the high school as a whole. That is something that we should talk about as well.
Thank you. Megan?
Sorry to keep talking. While he was speaking, it occurred to me that not only are we missing Linda's part of the agenda, but we're also missing the report out from the students. So if we could add that back too, that would be good.
Yeah.
And are we going to be getting a junior representative soon? I don't know who to direct that question to.
Sorry. I thought it was a minor thing, but never mind. At retreat, I thought we agreed that the language would no longer be to receive and approve, but to receive and consider. Because to receive and approve assumes that we're all going to say yes, whereas consider, could go either way. So I thought that we had agreed that that would be the language from now on.
We talked about something like that, and I don't recall, how do we indicate that there was going to be a vote? Because I know that's something that the public really wants to see on the agendas. I remember discussion, is it possible vote?
To receive and vote as needed or
Something like
along-
that,
yeah.
like instead of to assume that it's going to go positive.
See the recommendation and then vote on acceptance, or?
To receive whatever it is we're receiving and then comma and vote when
Yes,
appropriate,
vote
when
is-
necessary.
Yes, vote is operative.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You got it.
Good point. Other things folks have seen as we move forward in this term that they like to bring up. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's productive, I think, particularly in the early going. Yes, Lou.
I really appreciate getting the report ahead of time, a little bit ahead of time on the drive, and having a chance, the survey report, and having a chance to look at it. There was a lot of words, and I think important words, and I think it was really great that we had the chance to at least peruse it before the actual meeting, because a lot was coming at us in the meeting. So to the extent possible, I would encourage us to be able to look at some things ahead of time, if ever possible. Thank you.
I think typically these are sent out either Thursday or no later than Friday. So we typically we have the weekend to review it all. If there is a problem getting it, we need to be made aware of it so that everybody does get it. So
I just wanted to say thank you
Yep,
for getting it ahead.
It's probably already on there because I feel like Megan's brought this up, but the safety concerns, especially now that I've seen this data. I almost think we need to have a workshop of some sort to talk about the safety in our buildings. To talk about perhaps more SRO presence, to talk about things like metal detectors, all things I was reading in this report from parents. And I just think it's valid, and I think it's worth a discussion from us to see what we can do.
that's going to be part of our executive session workshop tonight.
I think this was something that potentially was tabled, and you may already have it on a future agenda, but the rediscussion or re-voting on the holidays, whether or not that is going to be approved or denied, or I thought the Jewish holidays, right? Am I correct? And that was voted on, but then like wasn't voted on. I don't know how that all went down.
So my quick response is that we are going to be doing work here very soon on our regional calendar. And we'll make sure to present you with some options that the committee can weigh in on and make decisions with what calendar gets adopted. But we'll make sure there's options in front of you so you can see the differences in all of those. And we'll make sure we do that. The other thing I'm looking at, just because you brought it up, how we try to make sure we're as smart as we can with our school year, so we're not so late in June just as a standing schedule. But we are part of a region, and we are one of 6 that have to adopt a schedule that is very similar, has less than 5 dissimilar days by state law. So that can be a challenge for us too.
Are we able to send you suggestions or something in relation to those, like calendar and how we can potentially like avoid going into June? I had a conversation with a fellow PTO member, and her mom actually teaches in Virginia, and they actually add 5 minutes onto their day. Every single day they add an additional 5 minutes, which then gives them, let's just say 5 to 7 extra days at the end of the year. And I know we would have to be mindful of teacher contracts and stuff like that. But I think there might be some like constructive ways that we can try and, I mean, we know we're gonna have snow days no matter what. We live in Maine. So that's not something that's ever gonna go away. So different ways that we can approach that and not getting them so far into June.
Yeah, please, I'll take any idea you can send me, any of you, and I'll have to look at some statute pieces. For some reason in my head, it's sticking out that in Maine, you can add an hour to a day and have it count up to like 5 to make it be a day. But you have to get permission to do that, and it's usually because of snow impact. So I just want to make sure that whatever we do is legal. But I love those kinds of ideas because anything outside of the box that we may not be thinking of, we'll take, because we want to be as smart as we can about it.
And I should mention that as the chair, I did, with Jake's assistance, I did make a request to the to Penda Macon, who's the director of the Maine Education. She's the commissioner, to allow for a waiver on the number of school days this year due to a bunch of things. And what the approach was to set a final date of June 16th. We asked, could we just, however many days it is, that we would ask for a waiver, and that we would go to school through June 16th, as many days as was physically possible. And we have not heard back, right?
There's been some ongoing discussion back and forth, but we're still in progress.
still
We have
waiting.
submitted. Yeah.
But we did submit that. Jake and I did send that along, so that did happen. So we'll see what happens. Janet?
Just a point of clarification on that. That was for this school year only, correct? Not school years going forward.
So the waiver request we just submitted is for this school year only. I will say though to this committee that I have started to express my interest in potentially for a bill in the future to have an endpoint of school days in Maine. I don't know if that will get any traction, but I would love to pick the second Friday in June as the last day for schools in Maine as part of statute. But again, I don't know if that will get any traction, never mind how much traction. But I think that one of the real challenges we have, as Member Hurd brought up, we're gonna have snow days or inclement weather or ice the way things are going, and we do live in Maine. We're not making frivolous decisions about what's a school day, what's an inclement weather, day off. And I'll continue to make this push that I think that there's a thread of communication out there that, well, if you can't be in school, you should have remote days. I will sit here and I can be moved off my rock, but I'm sitting on my rock right now, and that remote days are not effective for our children. They are not. And so the idea that we would have a snow day and call it a remote day and act like it's a day is, to me, it's got a number of things, part of it that, and we shared that in the waiver. But I also think moving forward, the idea that we could have a bad weather year and have 6, 8, 10 snow days and then just keep pushing them out, it's just really hard, I think, on communities.
I just want to remind everybody, we're getting off of the agenda and we need to get back to it. We're on future agenda items and we're not here to discuss anything that's not on this agenda at this time. So.
Ms. Parks?
When we do discuss the calendar more thoroughly, I would like to remind everyone that just last summer, the state of Maine began recognizing Juneteenth as a holiday. And so we need to keep that in mind, as that would not be a in-service day, is my assumption.
And this year happens to land on a weekend, so we're okay for this year.
Anyone else? We need a motion to go into executive session to discuss school safety planning in accordance with 1 MRSA 4056F. Have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Whitlow. I have a
Second.
second. Second by Ms. Parks. Any discussion? Word 2.
That's right. It's me. Yes.
Word 3.
Yes, thank you.
If Word 1 is yes. Word 4.
Yes.
Word 5.
Yes.
Word 6.
Yes.
Word 7.
Yes.
City
Yes.
Council and at large.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. We will move into executive session at 8:00.